Welcome to Identity at the Center Live. I'm Jeff, and that's Jim. Hey, Jim.
Hey Jeff, how's it going?
Oh, not so bad yourself.
Good for Thursday. Been heads down in workshops all week,
Hmm.
so been pretty busy. And we've recorded the Identity at the Center podcast yesterday,
Yep.
and had an old friend, Adam Michael from Texas A&M University. That episode is going to go live on the 24th.
Hmm. Yeah, 24th around noon Eastern. Yeah, I really liked it. I know they're all of our babies, all of our podcast episodes. They're all special. We have a lot of great guests, so hats off to you because you're the one who gets all of the people to appear on our show. And I really enjoyed the conversation with Adam. I think sometimes when we talk about higher education and university and identity, um, it is really complex. And I think there's just a lot of challenges and struggles that you kind of have to work through. And I pulled out a teaser yesterday when I was kind of editing the show that, I don't want to paraphrase it because I'm sure I'll butcher it, but it was something along the lines of like, they don't typically see like one or two industries worth of problems. They see like almost all the industries worth of problems from an identity perspective. So it was really interesting. So I'm definitely looking forward to getting that out there in front of the public on the 24th.
Yeah, absolutely. And I thought one of the most interesting parts of it was at the very end. So, kind of how I've been describing how we do the podcast is we start off with our opening banner like we're doing now.
Mm-hmm.
Then there's the meat. That's, most of the podcast where we talk about the subject matter that our guest is expert in. And then we end it with a lighter note. And so, just kind of preview. If you don't mind, I'm going to preview.
Yeah, go ahead.
The lighter note was, if you could teach a college course on anything, what would it be? And then the second one that you came up with was, if you could go to Mars, would you?
Mm-hmm.
Um, and I don't think I gave the best answer, but I yielded my time back
Yeah,
to
you didn't even
Adam.
answer
And
it.
oh, I did. I said no. I
That's
wouldn't
a
go to
flat out
Mars.
no.
I
You
mean,
won't go to Mars?
I wouldn't go to Mars. No,
Where's the
there's
sense of adventure, man? Come on. So,
if you had said to me, like, if you could go back to, if you, or put it this way, I wouldn't go back in time
mhm.
unless I had to. But if you said, "Hey Jim, we're going to send you back in time to, you know, 1870 or 1880, would you go west?" I would say yes. That they're my sense of adventure. But actually, I think I would only go west if, I was in good physical condition and
Right.
that all the opportunities were right.
Right.
So
You're no William Shatner, right? Going on rocket ships at 90 years old or whatever he is.
that guy's amazing, man. 90 years old to, you hear him speak and his brain is still working at such a level that
Yeah.
I'm jealous.
Hashtag my captain.
Yeah, there you go.
So let's talk a little bit about identity. Anything interesting? Well, before we get to that, let's just kind of brief people who aren't as familiar with this because this is the first. I think this is the first episode that we've actually sort of started to promote. We put a post on LinkedIn. We've been kind of doing this the last few weeks, and this is number 7 for us. Kind of slow rolling it, kind of getting it figured out. Formatting, technical, all that fun stuff that as much as we can control. And it's really meant to be a companion to the podcast. Gives us a little more opportunity to be more current because sometimes we're recording podcasts, weeks in advance, depending on schedules and things like that. But let's just kind of also pick apart articles that we like, that we saw during the week, that we thought are interesting, having to do with the identity space. Gives us our vendor neutral, safe place, right? No advertising, things like that. We don't really promote anything other than ourselves, right? The podcast itself. Yeah, and that's pretty much the intention. Is just kind of have like an informal chat and discussion, and hopefully people who are watching live are dropping comments in as we're kind of talking through here, and letting us know what they think about what we're talking about, or if they're watching on a replay, dropping a comment. I'm certainly going to go back and check for comments there and respond and things like that. So that's really kind of what the purpose of today is, or what this Identity Center Live is. Um, let's talk about our weeks real briefly, and you go before we get, because I think we got 5 articles that we actually want to get to today. Anything interesting that you worked on? You mentioned that you were, heads down in, kind of discovery meetings and things like that. I was part of that as well to some degree, not as much as you, but what's going on?
Yeah, I mean, in workshops with the client, and I obviously won't reveal, the client or too much about their industry. But I think it's, what keeps coming up to me is there's an even bigger emphasis on the balance between user experience and security. I think one thing that we are starting to or that we struggle with is that the assumption from the business is that yes, we are secure, but the user experience needs to improve.
Hmm.
And I think what the, the catch 22 with that is that even if you are secure, you're probably not secure enough, and and one of the things that you talk about a lot is that that line keeps moving. So even if you're secure enough today, guess what? By next year, you won't be.
Right.
And so that's one thing that just kind of became refreshed to me. Um, and I think a lot of times is that the user experience is, you know, a secondary thought when it comes to internal access management. And it really shouldn't be. I think we've had this conversation on the podcast a few times, right? On
Hmm.
which is more important. And, if we put this question out, where would people fall? Or we did a webinar and we asked this question, and so
Hmm.
we started getting responses. What's more important, security, usability, or they're equally important? Um, my vote was no, security is more important. And maybe it's just that that's my lean. Maybe I'm just a security guy.
Well, I think it was, I remember that webinar poll, and we were kind of betting behind the scenes what was going to be the number one. I think the usability has to be there. I don't think it's, if you, it's almost like, you know, Jedi and Sith. If you go too far to one extreme, right, there need to be like a gray Jedi, somewhere in the middle, right? Only a Sith deals in extremes. You've got to make sure that not only is the product or service secure, but it's got to be usable, because if it's not usable, they're going to just find a way around, right, the product and use it. I do the same thing, right? If I don't like the way something works, I go, well, let me figure out a better way to do this, and find an alternative to what I want to do. Um, I do think it's getting better in the enterprise. I think part of this is I think people are taking that into account, that user experience, when they're designing services. And I think we're now in this kind of wave of we've gotten, I don't see very many legacy identity and access management products anymore. Or if they are, they're in the process of going away in favor of something more modern, maybe something, cloud based, something like that. And I think those interfaces are significantly better than probably what has been designed, back in the 2000s or even 1990s, right? Not to pick on some of the legacy ones. I'm sure we can think of the ones that we're, that we're thinking about. But the design has gotten better. But I also think it's part of it might be the workforce too, right? I think the people who are now in positions of leadership are starting to get into those positions of leadership are maybe a little bit younger than they were, you know, current, maybe a few years ago, and the expectations of what is considered usable has changed. It's that moving bar, right? The definition of, okay, well, it used to be okay that I would have to pull out my RSA token, find the number, type it in, and then type in another ID and a password, and then I'd have like a pre-boot password, and there was like 8 different passwords to get into the network. And now that's like, nah, that's not a great experience. We need to fix that. One, maybe two, maybe three authentication points if it's really crazy security, but that should be it. I think that's gotten a lot better, which is great, right? I think it makes it easier, but it's also much more secure too by design, right?
Yeah, the other thing I was thinking though is there's the tool. I think you're talking about a bit about the tool. So when you're implementing IAM or improving your IAM, you're buying a tool. You're buying the practices within the tool. The search function, is it any good within that tool? I mean, if you're doing a great job, but your tool has a really bad search function, there's not a whole lot you can do about that. But if we just abstract and say, okay, those things are going to be up to standard, which they're not always, but I think they're getting better out there. Then you have the data. Do you have good identity data? Do you have good role and entitlement data? Are you asking users to select from 6,000 different entitlements, or have you boiled it down to business roles? And to the extent that you can, have you automated the access so when someone comes on board or remains on board, that their access adjusts appropriately
Mm-hmm.
based on their role? Uh, that's a
That's
big
usually where I
key.
see the problem. Like, I don't think it's a tool problem. It's usually bad data or a bad design of how the data is being used. That's typically what
Yeah,
I see.
that's usually the case for an organization that's upgraded their tool within the past decade. or roughly. Then the other one is, I mean, big enterprises have, and we've suffered with this like for forever, right? Is you might be doing a really good job on applications that are integrated to your Active Directory. You
Hmm.
might be doing a really good job on certain key applications, and then it kind of fades out. And the further you get from the center, the worse the integration becomes. It's like, well, how do I get access to application 123? It might not even be integrated into your IGA platform, and you might not even go there to request it. Maybe you open a ServiceNow ticket, or maybe you send an email to somebody that people just happen to know manages that application. And so that can be a whole other series of, or a whole other set of things that confuse people.
Yeah, I think it's also too is we're still dealing with a lot of legacy technology. As much as people maybe don't want to think that it is, it is. Because if you go to a startup today, and this is funny, I was actually having this conversation with one of our managing directors, Terry, last night about kind of the state of IM and some other things. And we were talking about startups. And I was like, I don't have as much experience, working on identity in a startup environment. But I got to imagine it's not like they have, these legacy on premise systems like SAP, mainframes, Oracle things and databases and things like that. It's all mostly cloud stuff, which means from an authentication standpoint, they should be single sign on. They should be using modern authentication. And therefore, they should require actually fewer tools to kind of get things done. And it was just an interesting kind of thought experiment as we're kind of like talking through it. And I was kind of thinking out loud. I was like, okay, at what point are we going to be a, mostly cloud, business industry where even Active Directory, the on-prem version of it at least, is considered legacy? I mean, the strategy we typically see is let's consolidate as much of our authentication as we can onto Active Directory, which is sound and makes a lot of sense. And increasingly now it's moving to like Azure Active Directory or some sort of central directory. It could be Azure, it could be Okta, Ping, whatever the central directory is for the organization. But it's that changing and ever expanding or lowering or uppering bar that things like that, they add complexity. I can't talk to the environment, and you compound that with poor access entitlement definitions or names. I mean, I'm sure everyone who's watching this is probably familiar with like AD groups. You look at the AD group, and it's like IT gobbledygook. It doesn't make any sense to the business for the most part, right? I do think that is getting a little bit better. But then how do you put that into business friendly terms? Because then it goes into a system, an IGA system, for example, goes to make an access request. And how do you translate, IT dash, FNC dash 46 means, oh, this is the finance server that has, this client on it or this project on it or whatever it may be. There's a lot of work to kind of make that work effectively to the user. And this is actually one of my pet peeves when I was, on the other side of consulting, in the enterprise, was building out that access catalog that actually made sense. And, I'm not afraid to say it. I was very much a stickler for how it looked, the data quality. And, I'm proud of the way it turned out. Could have been better, of course, right? There's always room for improvement. But, the structure was there and seeded, for the next generation to be able to expand on it and scale and have it be user friendly and all that good stuff. So, yeah, soapbox there, but that's how I
No,
feel.
no, it's you're making a lot of good points, and what came to mind as you're talking about that is, I kind of feel empathetic for the business users who just want to get somebody onboarded.
Mm-hmm.
User A used to work here; they're being replaced by user B. Why can't you just set up user B like use with what user A had? I get that frustration. Um, but I hope people on the other end, the folks who are in that frustrating role, understand that so much of a security risk to have something like that.
Yeah.
So we have to meet somewhere in the middle, which is, making access easier to understand. Maybe being able to go back and see what the old user had, so that you can determine which of these things need to be brought forward. Not making the interface so easy that it's just like select all, drag over, because then people don't even have to think about it. But, we're all stewards of some part of the business, and within our role, there is a security aspect to that.
Yeah, I agree. I mean, I think make it easy for the business to make good decisions, and good things will follow, I guess.
One last point I wanted to make is that I think, in our role, um, there's certain things that we just say these are best practices, these are golden rules, these are things every time. Things like, I had the discussion today where it's like, we're talking about layers of security and least privilege, right? So when we're talking about something like appliances running on the network, and we think about the solar wind compromise that happened last year, or 1 year plus,
Yeah.
uh, when that happened, right? It's hard to contain something like that, right? You're trusting solar winds to be in your environment, but at the same time, you want to treat all of those appliances knowing that something like that could happen. That's a vector of attack to least privilege,
Hmm.
minimize the amount of damage that it could potentially do. Um, Another thing that comes to mind is privilege access management. We had a discussion today about backdoor accounts. Golden rule: no backdoors.
Hmm.
No backdoors.
They exist. We all know it.
They exist. They should not
They should
exist.
not, but
And there
admins
should
do it.
be there should be a rule against it. And admins probably wouldn't do it if it was something that would risk their jobs,
Yeah. I mean, if there
right?
was a way to effectively check to make sure that that stuff, that behavior wasn't occurring, sure, of course. I think, you know, there's always this incentive to make sure that things are kept up and working, and then the what if game. Well, what if something goes down? I need a way. Like, what if our privilege access management system goes down? I need a way to get past that. Every time you poke a hole in it, it just adds to the surface attack area that you need to protect. And if you don't know about it, then you can't protect it. So it's a little bit of a catch-22 sometimes with, well, we need to do this. Here's why we do it. Well, you shouldn't be doing that, but we have to do it, or we think we have to do it. So just as a ping pong ball, and it's like tennis, going back and forth, trying to figure out, well, why is it? Do you feel you have to do that? Is it because the service isn't resilient enough? Okay, well, let's fix the service and make sure that it is resilient, and making sure you've got the right, you know, contingencies in place for it.
Right. Yeah, you're saying all the right things. And so the last one that I was going to mention on these golden rules, one is do not model it. Don't use model after.
Mm-hmm.
In other words, don't have the capability for someone to say, just make user B like user A. Just do it, darn it.
Well, I think
Don't do it.
that's the role that that's the not being able to really effectively know who has access to what. Model after theoretically is okay if you're modeling after a well-defined role that is tightly controlled. The challenge and the mistake becomes when you don't have those controls in place and you say, well, let me model myself after Jim, and you didn't manage what Jim had access to and all the myriad of roles that he had throughout his term in the organization. And he collected this, I call it the snowball of access. Like everything just kind of stuck to him and nothing ever went away. That's where model after breaks down. And that's why it's not seen as a good security practice is because of that issue. It's because fundamentally the root is there were not good controls to make sure that pristine Jim existed and the less pristine version of Jim and his role later, didn't exist.
You got pristine Jim right here.
Pristine Jim's right there.
IDAC Live.
Should we talk about some of these articles that you and I were kind of banding about before? Because I saw
Yeah,
this
some
one.
of them are. Some
Yeah.
of these are just hilarious. This one's hilarious.
I love this one because it's just it never fails to impress me how creative the Raspberry Pi group can be. And if you're not familiar with Raspberry Pi, it's a little kind of dedicated computer system. The idea is it's very modular, very cheap, and you kind of make it do whatever you want. And these researchers were able to basically measure electromagnetic waves based on data packets flowing between systems to say, oh, it looks like this system is under attack from ransomware. And this is an article from neowin.net. So, and we'll put the links to the articles in our show notes after we finish going live here so people can kind of check them out if they want to. But I thought this was just really cool. And I had to bring it up because it's like, okay, well, how do you detect a ransomware? There's like all these signals and things you can do on the network. And meanwhile, you've got this little disconnected device. It's running on a Raspberry Pi using an oscilloscope that is basically just a stethoscope listening, right, for EM waves as that don't sound normal, which sounds to me like science fiction, magic, craziness, and I am all in for it. What do you think?
Well, I'm thinking the article doesn't say how it figures this out, right? But
It
I gotta
does.
think it's does it?
Yeah, it's so what they did is they measured the EM waves, the electromagnetic waves, and they say, okay, well, here's what a normal system sounds like when it's doing this. And when malware is in there, it's detecting the change in the electromagnetic waves. So hard drives, SSDs, things like that are all working off magnets, and they can detect the variances in the fields that are taking place. And they say, okay, well, this is what a normal SSD, for example, sounds like. Now here's one that's infected like with malware. Apparently there's clear. I mean, obviously I'm not a scientist, but apparently there's a difference.
But you play
And
one on the internet.
yeah, I played it on the internet, but this is no different than the user behavior analysis, analytics kind of space where they're looking for normal behavior from a authentication or an authorization perspective. It's just another way to do UBA. It's just using physical signals from the device.
So when I said they didn't really explain how they did it, I was thinking one more layer down from where you were. So I'm
Okay.
like, okay, yeah, there's the difference, but what's the difference? And so what I was thinking is what a ransomware event does is it's going to encrypt a hard drive, right? So the act of encrypting must sound like this, must spew off these waves because it's thrashing the hard drive and doing it at top speed, nonstop the whole time. Whereas a normal computer is just, you know, random access across the disk. It it's looking at different places on the disk to open files,
Mm-hmm.
whereas maybe with ransomware it's just reading it just like a record and just going across the platter and just turning it all into strings of ones and zeros.
Yeah. I mean, I don't think it's not the catch-all, right? And this is not. I don't feel like this is a scalable solution. Obviously, this is proof of concept and yet another way. I guess if you have a need for this, there's something out there. I am impressed by the accuracy. 99.82% accuracy. That's pretty impressive for a proof of concept and trying to figure it out. Can you turn this into a product? Maybe. I don't know. I don't think so. I mean, I guess there's probably
I mean,
some application
whoever
for
came
it.
up with it, I'd hire them.
Yeah, clearly. I mean, you got some brilliant people who are thinking kind of through this stuff. But anyway, I thought it was cool. Raspberry Pi
Right.
can detect malware attack using electromagnetic waves with astonishing accuracy.
I
Not
remember you.
clickbait at all, which is great.
I remember one of the ForgeRock conferences. There was somebody who did a presentation on. They installed OpenAM, and at least it was OpenAM on a Raspberry Pi, and this was like I don't know, 10 years ago maybe, not quite.
Authentication server in your pocket or something.
Exactly.
Let's move to the next one here. Ransomware, and this is from TheVerge.com. A ransomware attack took down a jail in New Mexico in the U.S., leaving inmates in lockdown. I think this is just another case of ransomware that knocked out systems, and the system in this case happened to be the automated doors, the camera system. I mean, obviously not a good thing to be to have happen. I think if this were combined maybe with some other attack, maybe even the physical world, this could have led maybe to some other repercussions and things like that. But I guess another reminder, at least from my perspective, is like we have a lot of connected systems, and maybe this is the jailbreak of the future. Instead of landing the helicopter on the roof of the jail, it's that plus someone introduced ransomware to take down the cameras and open up all the jail cells like you see in any of the hacker movies, right? With people
Yeah.
escaping.
Well, I think the other angle of the article was probably lawsuits coming for people who didn't get their time in the yard or outside of their cells. But I so my serious view on this was, oh, we're talking about ransomware. Oh, ransomware is back. No, ransomware never went away.
Yeah.
This article did not make national news.
Right.
And from the time of the Colonial Pipeline to this article, there have been hundreds, thousands of ransomware attacks that just were just not big enough to make the nightly news. I'm a big fan of the Risky Business podcast. They went over like 4 or 5 that happened over the holidays, and that wasn't a complete list.
Yeah.
Um,
There's just too many.
that's like
It happens all the time now. We're almost becoming desensitized to it.
Exactly, exactly. And when it will make big news again is when it shuts down gasoline or
Hmm.
getting food on the shelves or something like that. And so, but unfortunately, it's not slowing down.
Yeah. Yeah, I liked it. I thought it was cool. Um, this is another one that popped up relatively recently from Avanon.com. Basically, people are using Adobe Creative Cloud as just another vehicle to deliver phishing attacks to people. So, what the idea is that you have a link, a bad link, inside of a file on a legit service that is sent through a legit looking email for somebody who's expecting or maybe can be tricked into suspecting that there is something that they are, you know, trying to do. It's like you see the screenshot here. It's like, well, this is coming from Adobe. It must be safe. I think people who are in the space probably know that that's not always true. But this is not an attack on, probably a specific person. This is a let's just throw something out into the internet and see what sticks and, who's going to click on it.
A new vector of attack, right? I mean, email systems are quarantining emails that have
Mm-hmm.
bad links,
Yeah.
attachments that have bad links, or emails with bad attachments. So now a new form of attack is use a web document from a source that looks reliable, like Google, Adobe, something like that, and then stick the bad link in either in the document or in the one I saw on Google Docs was stick the comment in or stick the link in a comment on the doc that says, hey, yeah, I was when I saw this part of the document, I thought of this
Mm-hmm.
link, and then the person clicks on the link, and all of a sudden they're installing malware on their computer.
Yep. It's inception of links and wrappers to obfuscate and dodge things. So something to be aware of. I hate this article so much. Basically, these companies are adding crypto mining to their antivirus software. So Norton did it a few weeks ago, I think officially. I think they've been doing it in test or pilot before that. And it is opt-in, so I need to put that out there. But here's another antivirus platform that's adding crypto mining. I mean, I don't know who thinks this is a good idea because the number one complaint that I hear about antivirus software is how much it slows down my system. Now you're adding crypto mining to it, which is very CPU or GPU intensive to try and mine this at least at an effective hash rate to be able to actually do anything with it. And you're giving up your resource for that mining in exchange for a portion of what you are, basically mining. So Avira's not doing this because out of the goodness of their heart they think they can help you out. They're going to take a cut of it. Norton takes a cut of it. It's basically just a crowdsourced way to get around, limits on mining machines and costs and stuff like that. I hate this so much and I wish it would stop.
Yeah, I think so. Anybody who reads the article, and Brian Krebs has a great
Yeah.
website, but if you get down into the bottom of the article, you can read all the comments. And then it's entertaining. I kind of feel like I am interested in crypto mining, but it sounds to me, at least from the comments that I was reading, that the idea is that unless you had a really high end GPU, you're going to spend more money on electricity than you're going to recoup in crypto. And it kind of gave me the idea that this is probably something for college students to do who are living in dorms who have, free electricity.
This is
And
business.
that's what
This
I've
is a
heard
big
that,
business. Crypto mining is huge. I mean,
yeah,
people go off and they buy racks and racks and racks of GPUs, tie them together. The software to actually set it up. I've tried it. I've done it. It's not for me. Um, it is easy to do. The hardest part at this point is finding enough high-end video cards, which is terrible for all the PC gamers out there like myself who can't find these things at a reasonable price. Where a high-end video card might have cost $750, $800 US a few years ago or before crypto mining. Now they're going for 2 grand, 3 grand, 4 grand because they're so hard to get, and the silicon shortage has been a thing for the last year or so, and it's just crazy. People go and buy racks and racks, and you see and read about this stuff all the time where it's like, oh, there's this small town and their electricity spiked and it finds out someone opened up a crypto mining place. Okay. I mean, I don't have any comment on the legitimacy of the business itself, My problem is sticking it on antivirus software to the
Yeah.
common person, and then them not being aware of what this is and what it potentially could do and what it means, and just clicking, oh yeah, it's okay, just accept, 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 right, and then just run through it, and all of a sudden their computer runs like crap. So
Yeah. And then they make 7 cents in
yeah,
Bitcoin.
and then meanwhile they spent $700 on electricity, and they're wondering why they're paying so much. You
So
brought this one to
when you
me.
did,
Yeah.
I know we're running out of time, but I mean, how
Go
much
ahead.
money did you
Oh, not much. I mean, it was like
make
this
when you
was
do it?
probably like 5 years ago, and as a proof of concept, I actually ran it on a Surface Go version 1, like generation 1, which is like this really old Pentium processor, totally not designed for it. But my thought was like, well, if it has a decent enough hash rate and I can kind of plug it in the corner and it runs off a low power USB, maybe it makes sense. It wasn't. I mean, the game is all about high end computational components, specifically GPUs, especially ones that have been designed to maximize the hash rate. So I'm not into it. I know people who are. Cool, right? I don't really care either way. I hate to see it in the antivirus software.
Yeah.
All right, here, let's get to our last article here because I know we're running out of time and we actually have meetings because this is not our real job. You brought this one today. Russian hackers bypass 2FA by annoying victims with repeated notifications. And I called this APNA, Advanced, what did I say? Advanced?
Advanced persistent notification annoyance attack.
Right. Yeah. So that's I'm coining that as, basically they're spamming your phone or whatever your push notification device is until you're like, fine, I'll just accept it. Get out of my face. Right.
Yeah, well, the sad part about this is that this push notification was supposed to be the savior for SMS is not a good enough way to get people their one-time password. So they'll have an out-of-band process where they have to allow access through their device. It could be their watch. So then it becomes something that's very convenient. It's just a little pop up on the watch. And I know personally, like, if I'm sitting on the couch and my laptop's open in my office, um, my email might get logged out and tries to log itself back in, creates an app notification, and asks me to allow or deny. Now, I never go and allow without getting back to my computer,
Mm-hmm.
but I'm an identity and access management
Right.
security consultant, right?
Yep.
So one would hope that I don't do it. But the average person might think, well, yeah, this is happening again. Or what's really being talked about here is that it just bugged the heck out of somebody. Eventually, they're going to either accidentally hit allow or they're just going to hit allow to get it to go away.
Mm-hmm.
Because human behavior is such what you talked about earlier. You're going to find a way. Hey, I realized if I hit allow, it stops bugging me.
Right. Yeah. Exactly. Yeah. It's interesting. I think this is training, right, to make sure you know what your push notifications are doing. I think there's a user interface element here too. If you notice, specifically like on iOS, and it's been a while since I used an Android device, but the accept and the reject buttons are literally right next to each other in the same modal box that pops up. So maybe you don't have good dexterity. Maybe you're out one night and you've, consumed some things that maybe affect that. What if you click the wrong button by mistake, right? You didn't mean to, you wanted to reject it, but you accidentally hit it. Or maybe you're doing something on the car and your finger moves and it hits the wrong thing, right? I would love to see it separated a little bit better, even just physically, to make it harder to accidentally accept something you didn't mean, or conversely, accidentally reject something that you meant to accept. So I think there's certainly a user interface like component that could be drawn back there.
I think the ultimate solution is a YubiKey, right? I think YubiKey hard token is it's not quite as convenient as just leveraging your phone. Don't get me wrong, but has the advantage of it's not just a button you have to push. You have to insert that YubiKey into some kind of receiving device.
I like the idea of the YubiKey. I think it makes sense for enterprise. I don't think it's user friendly enough for consumers though, and I don't know what the right answer is. I think push notifications probably as good as we have right now. You combine that with biometrics. I think there's certainly a chain of authentication steps that could take place. Let's say Microsoft Authenticator app. If you were going to approve something, you hit approve, and then it immediately prompts you for your face. And what happens if you did it by mistake or didn't mean to? You may not have enough time to like pull your face out of the way, and then it automatically approves it. So I think there's steps that need to place there. I think the last thing people want is to carry yet another thing around and have to either plug it into their phone or click another button on some other device that they've got to carry around. I think we need to get better at figuring out the user interface design to make it as secure as possible, and try to, throttle maybe notifications. You can only get one per minute or one per 5 minutes. I don't know what the right number is, but there's got to be a better way to do this. I think for UBKs, definitely, makes sense for some applications, especially in the enterprise, where you can kind of control that experience and that behavior more. But I can't imagine, your dad walking around with, oh, I got my YubiKey, right? That's not going to happen.
No, for sure not. So we did another episode, Jeff, another episode where we said, what are we going to talk about? I don't know.
Yeah.
We'll figure it out. There it goes.
That is the fourth wall is, it's a work in progress. Sometimes we don't know until like minutes before or even while we're talking. I mean, I think we try to come up with some ideas, throughout the week or whatever it may be, or something pops up, late or whatever it might be. But I mean, it's good for us. There's plenty for us to talk about and for us to relate to. And, there's hopefully more people kind of catch on. And if you're watching this, like, subscribe, hit that notify button. The schedule is a little bit all over the place because we're trying to work this in between our actual real jobs and things like that. So if you don't catch it live,
post any
watch the
topics
replay.
or questions.
Yeah,
topics and questions. I mean, that'll give us some things to talk about in the next one.
Yeah, exactly.
Oh, and also download and start listening, if you don't already, to our audio podcasts. We publish once a week, every Monday around noon Eastern.
Mm-hmm. Yep.
We're starting what I've been calling the CISO Perspectives series. So we've got a string of CISOs, or people who are in, IAM director, IAM manager roles, who have, a lot of history in the space. And so we should get some really interesting perspectives over the next few weeks.
Yeah, it's pretty cool. Our new season, 2022 season, starts January 17th. So that'll be our first one. And then weekly after that. And you can always check them out at idacpodcast.com. We're on Twitter at idacpodcast. We're in your, Twitter feed. We're in your, your podcast apps. Our good buddy Arturo is out there. This is great, guys. I like it. Thanks, Arturo. It's great to see you on here. So this is the kind of interaction I think we look for as we get more folks, hopefully, signed up and hitting that like and subscribe button. We'll have a little more interaction and dialogue with folks. But yeah, if you're catching this on the replay, don't hesitate to put comments in there. We read them all, and we'll comment them all. And if we don't bring it up, give us ideas for next shows and things like that. So, all right, I feel like we're a little bit rambling. Probably a good spot to call it for this week. Anything else, Jim, or are we done?
We're good. See you next week, guys.
Okay.
And gals.
Take care, everybody. See ya.